is being recorded. Both the slides and the recording will be posted. The slides will show up on the NorCal FTC website, and the video will show up on our YouTube channel. If you're not familiar with those, they're both here in the link. I know it's not possible to click the links in these presentations, but grab a hold of the presentation afterward, and the links will be live for you, and they're easy to work with. In a webinar such as the one we're running right now, you are all muted, so none of you can speak. So we will have a dedicated time for questions at the end. If you do find something that is sort of time critical related to what's in the current slides, it's okay to go ahead and type in questions via the question feature of GoToWebinar. Right? When you launch, there should be a little tool that popped up, and one of the dark gray lines says questions. If you pop that open, there's a place for you to type the question in, and it'll show up. And so as much as we can, we'd like to hold the questions all to the end. It makes them a little easier to manage, but if it's really something that it is critical to the slide in question, please feel free to go ahead and jump in, and Ashley will help get those into the mix. Just by way of a few introductions, Ashley is here. Ashley is my co-program delivery partner for Northern California. I'm Mark Edelman. I'm one of the founders of Playing at Learning and a program delivery partner here. We have also, I don't know that they're going to be joining us tonight, but we have a couple of other key volunteers, Annika Seamers and Jill Wilker, who serve as our regional judge advisors. Jill also happens to be one of the other co-founders of Playing at Learning and my spouse by way of confession. And then we have two long season head referees that have worked with us for 10 plus years, Jeff Green and Rick Swan. They typically are my go-to head referees, and for our NorCal Regional Championships, they have been my head referees for many years.
Okay, hey everybody. So just a little bit about me. My name is Ashley. I know many of you have received emails from me. If you are a rookie team this year, I'm the person that you will be contacting, me and Mark. If you have questions, like Mark said, I'm a First Tech Challenge NorCal program coordinator. I wanted to let everybody know that my easiest method of contact is to call this phone number right here. And it's also listed at the end of most of or all of my emails. You'll dial the number, and then it'll give you an opportunity to put in the extension. My office hours are Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And this was the best way to contact me because we get a lot of emails throughout the season, and a lot of the questions are just quick questions that could be answered, or a lot of them we have to go back and forth to figure out the final answer to the question. So if you could just call me, we can get your question answered all at once. But if you need something like digital documents, then go ahead and send an email to me at ashley@playingatlearning.org.
Excellent. So first off, kickoff challenges. Why wasn't there an in-person kickoff for the whole NorCal community this year? Well, last year's kickoff was amazing and overwhelming all at the same time. We had more than 1,000 people show up, and unfortunately, it literally overwhelmed the venue. And so there were a lot of unanticipated costs to the hosts, some sort of repercussions for the gracious teacher that helped get us into the school, and a lot of negative impact from that. And then one of the other sort of unfortunate side effects was the 1,000 attendees made it very difficult for a significant proportion of the attendees to be able to participate in the workshops that we'd set up. And so over the season, we talked about a lot of different kinds of models. And so we piloted something new this year. Each of our 4 leagues had a mini kickoff for the teams in their leagues. We did offer out the opportunity for others to host smaller kickoffs, but we really didn't have anybody offer to take it up until it was to the point that it was too late to really be able to get them engaged and spun up to be able to have a quality event. The other thing we did was ask all of our workshop providers to go ahead and move those workshops into an online resource. So you probably saw a note from Ashley right about kickoff time saying, hey, we've got these workshop videos ready for you. Please visit the YouTube channel. Here they are. So we're looking for feedback on that overall process, and then really trying to look how to move forward. We understand pretty clearly that the one singular kickoff really is not going to be viable anymore. Imagine as we continue to grow 10, 15% a year, that 1,000 attendees will continue to grow 10, 15% year over year. And so we really need to figure out a new model, and we are open and welcome to suggestion and input from all of you. And then there was one other small issue. I had a little bit of a personal conflict. Go figure. My son, who is a first alumni, scheduled a wedding on the Friday before kickoff. I mean, what was he thinking? So it was a beautiful day, beautiful wedding. We're very glad to have been there, but it was the first time in the history of First Tech Challenge that I was not at a kickoff event on the kickoff day. But the flip side of that is also, we need your help to make me less of a critical item in events happening for NorCal. If the community continues to rely on me to be the provider for a lot of things, there are going to be more and more of these kind of conflicts come up. Right? I now have 2 grandchildren. I now have a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law, and the conflicts will come as they do. And so I really need help. And so the community really can step up and help be a part of solving these needs for yourselves. All right, so on to one of our standard things. We really like to every year thank our regional sponsors. So I will put a caveat here. The PG&E funding is not 100% confirmed yet. Paperwork is in process. The casual language from everyone is it's going to look a lot like last year. The Dreammaker Fund funds actually have been allocated, so we do have them on board. So kind of pretty confident that the PG&E funds will come along, but they're not 100% yet. And then, I've got this box here that says your company's logos here. We really do need a few more sponsors, right? There's a lot more we could do. And one of the byproducts will show up here in a couple seconds, but we need your help in identifying companies that would be willing and able to help us fund the program for the region for all of you. So I talked at the beginning about this being sort of a packed agenda. We have a lot to cover. You're probably aware of some of the changes that have happened. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of them and why and what's happening. I want to go through a quick season timeline so that everybody has a sense of when things are going to happen. We're going to talk some about event registration costs. Now, remember that comment I made a few seconds ago about sponsorships. Well, pay attention to this event registration costs. We're going to talk a little bit about the qualifier registration process. So for those of you who aren't in leagues, how are you going to get registered to attend events? We're going to talk about the current status for our leagues, our qualifiers, the NorCal Regional Championship, and the First Championship. Sort of lay out the picture of what's the status of all of those. We have a handful of events and workshops that are coming up. And then I'm going to talk in a little bit more depth about the other ways that you can get involved to help make the program continue to be successful. And then our last piece will be some questions and answers, an opportunity for you to ask the things that I wasn't thoughtful enough to include in the presentation as we put it together. So changes, and more changes. So at some point in the last year, the first executives and the board of directors made a decision that they'd like to see more of the first programs align and have a more common look and feel within a lot of the resources that drive the program. So that includes the game manual, some of the terminology that's used to describe the gameplay itself. The volunteer roles are all coalescing in name and title. So there's a whole lot of changes. The way the question and answers that teams ask are going to be managed is changing. There'll be some changes that'll happen in the judging process, the definition of awards, the number of awards that are around and available, and what's going to happen at a given event. And if you've read your competition manual carefully, you will have noticed that there's some changes in the way the playoffs are working. So with all that, it has become clear to me in the role I serve. So again, I'll make a little bit of a confession. I'm part of the group that does the game development every year. I'm also the chief referee for the program. And so I have a pretty long understanding of this set of changes. And the language I've been using to talk out to all of my peers in the PDP, the program delivery partner world, and to all the referee volunteers I work with is to think about themselves as being a rookie again. There's enough changes in the current competition manual compared to prior seasons, that if you're a veteran team and you make any assumptions, you're likely going to make some mistakes and end up putting yourself into a hardship at some point during the season. The advice I've been throwing out is assume nothing and read everything, right? It really, the best way to make sure you're not making a mistake and assuming something as opposed to learning something is to read everything, to start fresh, right? That is the language we're using with everybody. And then the last piece of advice, be patient. It's going to take a lot of time for a lot of the teams and a lot of our long experienced volunteers to really transition into this new model. And so it's just going to take time. Be patient. Everybody's trying to accomplish the same, help you have a good season. So just be aware of that and work with us. Ask lots of questions and don't be surprised, right? That it's just going to take time. The season timeline. Last Saturday, the 7th, we had the Into the Deep kickoff. A lot of fun, some good feedback coming from around the country and around the world on the game. Looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to play. Sometime in the next few weeks, we're going to finalize the number of teams that'll be part of the leagues. We want to get that really nailed down probably in very early October. October 7th, we're going to open up the qualifying tournament registration preferences system. There'll be a little bit more about that in a slide or two. The last weekend of October, we're contemplating holding a scrimmage. Historically, because it's so close to Halloween, we've called it a scrimmage. And so costumes optional, but strongly encouraged. So that's on our plan. November, December, and January will be where the bulk of the activity is happening. So our leagues will be holding their meets probably one a month in November, December, January. The exact schedule is up to each of the leagues. And then the qualifying tournaments will similarly follow suit. November, December, January, early February, we'll have qualifying tournaments. Late January and early February, our leagues will be going through their league tournaments. By the middle of February, we're looking to do our Dean's List interview event. And by that last weekend of February, we want to run our regional championship. Part of the reason we want to be done at that point is if we don't, we lose a lot of volunteers and teams and mentors to other FIRST programs. The weekend after that 22nd, 23rd of February is the beginning of the FIRST robotics competition season for their events, their regionals. So we really try not to overlap that. So that's part of that. And then in the middle of April, the 16th through the 19th, the FIRST championship will take place in Houston. And we will be sending an unknown as of yet number of teams to that event. Next up, event registration and costs. In looking at this slide real quick, I'm going to rearrange it mentally here. For the 24-25 season, the cost for leagues is going to hold steady at $300. The qualifiers are going to go up a little bit by $25 an event. And the basic reason is I've been paying out of pocket for a lot of the costs of me going and supporting events. So I travel to an event, I've got to pay for gas, I've got to pay for hotels, I've got to pay for food. So the goal is to start trying to build a model that doesn't depend on my pockets to fund it, and instead relies on the community to effectively be self-supporting. Part of the rationale for that is that then allows me to offer that same support for other people that are also helping in that same tournament logistics role, right? Helping to get the equipment to the events and helping the events get set up, right? So that I can provide at least that financial support to make that less of a burden on those key volunteers. The regional championship, currently we're not quite sure what the costs are going to be. Depends on a lot of factors, right? Sponsorship. So we've relied on sponsorships over the last years. So as an example, last year, probably about half the budget of our regional championship was underwritten by PG&E. And so I mentioned a few slides ago that the PG&E sponsorship isn't finalized yet. So based on that, I really can't finalize my regional championship cost yet. So that one will be something that we'll be working through as we get a little bit more information on our sponsors. But even the qualifying tournament costs and the league costs also are impacted by sponsorships. So if I was able to accumulate another 3 or 4 sponsors for the program in the region, those costs could be brought down, right? Less of the burden could fall on all the teams and if with the support of more sponsors. All right, so qualifier registration. So if you're a rookie, this may be confusing. If you're a veteran team, this is the same thing we did last year. But basically, we're going to do waves of events, 1, maybe 2 months of events. So like maybe, for example, November, December, we will open up a not exactly a registration system, but a way for you to provide a ranked ordered list of what tournaments you would prefer to go to. And so you'll put together a listing of what you're willing to attend. And we will do a random sort of all the teams that have submitted a preference for that wave. And we will walk that randomly ordered list, and each team will get processed one by one. And the first event that's available for that team will be what they get assigned to. If they've given a very short list and none of those events are available, they just won't get assigned, and they will have to register in an open registration phase that will follow after the preferencing. So we'll talk about first and second registrations for events in depth in a later town hall meeting. Right now, we talk sometimes about first play, second play. They don't really mean chronologically. They're the first event you registered for and the second event you registered for. So for example, your team could register as a first preference for a December event. And then when the second registration cycle opens up, you could say, oh, I see there's November events still open. And you could register for a November event as your second registration. Chronologically, you'd play in November 1st and then play in December 2nd, but that's irrelevant. The first and second wave of registration, first and second event registration does not apply about chronology, it's order of registration. This bottom bullet is critically important this year. Teams need to be prepared to play early. So it is something that is really important. You really need to make sure that if you want to play more than once, you're probably going to need to play in November. You're certainly going to need to play in December. There just aren't going to be enough weekends for events if it doesn't happen that way. And some of the byproduct of this need to play early also is about some of the needs that'll pop up in our later slides when I come back to how you can help. So this is an eye chart. I'm not going to go through it in depth. When you get a chance to look at the slides, take a look at it. But basically, it's a sequence of events on how the preferencing system works in terms of when what's going on. This will also get populated into the website, so you'll be able to look at it there. But basically, there'll be 3 or 4 days where the preferencing submissions are open for each team. And then at the end of that window, later in the day, we'll actually do that process of randomly sorting the teams and going through that simulated first come, first serve registration. And we will post the results by the end of that day. Shortly after that, we will open up a sort of a general registration for that equivalent, right? So if it's a first registration window, then there'll be an opportunity for people who didn't get a preference assigned to then be able to do a direct registration. Just sort of understand there's some more documentation, and again, I will do a town hall. We'll talk in depth about this and allow people to really ask a lot of deep questions. It's an eye chart. So our leagues. The leagues are actually growing in a way that is encouraging. So all 4 of our existing leagues are back again this year. And we actually have more teams that are interested in participating in those leagues than we have capacity within those leagues. So each of the leagues is currently exploring their abilities to grow a little bit. If they aren't able to grow, it may mean that some of those teams aren't going to be assigned to those leagues. So maybe there's going to be a few more leagues. It might be a little tough to get the additional leagues created at this point in the season, unless it happens very quickly. So stay tuned, there might be more leagues. If you think you might be willing to be a league host or coordinator for next season, please let us know. Because based on sort of the response we got, Ashley and I were talking back and forth, and it was 1 to 2 additional leagues to support the additional demand this year. Is what it would have taken. For the qualifiers, we currently have 16 events that are in various states of confirmation. Some of them are fully confirmed. Some of them are waiting for final approvals from the school administrations. It's a process that happens every year with getting things nailed down. With that, ooh, what happened there? That was not exciting. With that, that works out to an anticipated about 1.5 plays a team if the current growth expectation holds true. Our standard model for growth is that we grow somewhere in the range of 10 to 15% year over year. As of this morning, we're at 10%, right? So the registration's funny this year, it's taking a very steep slope at this point in time. We're up to 166 teams. I think we finished last year just over 200 teams, like 215, something like that. We're expecting to get closer to 250 this year. And that's where this 1.5 is based on applying some, not complicated, but rather involved calculations. How many teams are going into leagues? How many teams register and don't play? How many teams want to play? So there's a whole lot of thinking that goes into it, but about 1.5 plays a team. Not a bad number, but likely not satisfying for most of our teams. To do what we'd really like, 2.5 plays a team, we need 10 more qualifying tournaments. So that could be accomplished by, some fraction of our existing tournaments growing or new tournaments being added. But, easy math to do. If we grow 10 to 15% a year, we need 10 to 15% more tournaments every year to support the same number of teams. So keep that in mind. We'll get to that, how you can help slide at the end. And one of those bullets will be something that applies to this. Okay, I got ahead of myself in my slides. We basically, I've already sort of talked to this. We can go through it pretty quickly. We need additional league coordinators and hosts. One way to think about it in terms of that 2.5 teams, 2.5 plays per team, 2.5 qualifying tournaments per team. Every league created takes away 2.5 tournaments, 2.5 qualifying tournaments of need, right? The league teams play in a closed environment and then finish with a league tournament that's basically a qualifier. That sequence of events, the 3 meets and the league tournament, equate to 2.5 qualifying tournaments in terms of a event load for the teams. So if you're willing to help, you think you might be interested, let us know. It isn't a commitment. It's we want to help you understand, to help you feel comfortable and help making it happen. We are currently exploring a couple of sites, a couple we've been to, a couple we haven't been. Target date, again, is the February 22nd, 23rd weekend. It's likely going to be a day and a half-ish kind of event again. We will come in day before the main event and do all of our setup. We'll do most of the judging and most of the inspection. It was great last year. I think we got all but 3 or 4 out of the 48 teams through the inspection and judging process, which allowed us to do something we haven't been able to do in many years, which is run 6 matches per team during the qualifying match play sequence part of the day. And so be prepared, watch for what's going on. We are planning our Dean's List interview event to be the weekend before. We need to leave enough time between the Dean's List interview event and our regional championship to be able to get some paperwork done and finalists notified and things like that, so we can get things lined up. We have been working on, you probably saw some emails from Ashley. Ashley's gathering key volunteers and key individuals to help with planning and execution for the regional championship. So if you haven't responded and you're willing to be an active participant, please go ahead and respond to Ashley, and that'll give us a chance to start the process. We'd really like to start the regional championship process planning now, right? So that it's more, the more we do now, the easier it is later when things get crazy in the January, February timeframe. First championship, I don't know if people have been watching the announcements from First, but we'll be back in Houston again this year at the George Brown Convention Center, April 16th through the 19th. They are growing the First Tech Challenge footprint a little bit. It will be 256 teams this year. So that's 4 divisions of 64 teams each to get to that number. Pay attention, there is a new stay to play requirement. So every team will be required to book their lodging through the First lodging system in order to be able to register to attend the championship. So make sure your team is paying attention to that as you get close. If you think you're one of those teams, you want to make sure you're not getting yourself into trouble with reserving space outside of their system, because you are going to have to reserve space through their system in order to be able to register and play. I mentioned earlier that the NorCal advancement, we don't know how many teams we're going to send. The advancement proportions will be announced in early December based on the current size of all the regions on December 2nd. So if you're thinking about registering, I would encourage you to register before December 2nd, because that's where they're going to make the decision, when they're going to make the decision about what regions get to send how many teams. Okay, your help is needed. So probably one of the biggest barriers to growth right now is that we need additional resources to continue to grow. Right? I mentioned earlier sponsors. We're getting to the point we need to have more equipment and more resources to be able to field more events. You know, as an example, right now, Playing at Learning has enough equipment to be able to run 4 events simultaneously, but we only have 1 trailer. So that 1 trailer can only go one place, and it requires somebody with a car with a trailer hitch to be able to tow it to that place, and it requires 4 of me to run and set those up, right? So you're starting to see where I'm going. There's some growth that's needed in the infrastructure to support the program. It can't continue to rely on me, or we're not going to have more than basically than the number of events we're having this year, because I can't go to 2 events in a day. Just physically not possible. We need other aspects to help support the events. We need key volunteers. So I'm talking about some of the roles that require training and certification. So we need referees, judges, inspectors, first technical advisors, scorekeepers, right? There's a long list of roles that have a pretty, it's relatively easy to become certified and trained. And those roles have a pretty profound impact on the quality of the event for the teams. Right, so it's it takes a little bit of effort, but it's not a hard way to get engaged and involved and help make the event successful. This field manager role, that's part of the piece that really needs some support. We need more people coming in and understanding how to set up a competition area, how to manage the event flow during the day, look for the sore points, right? And that's something that's a little hard to teach and a little hard to learn if you don't go to an event. But if you come to an event, hang out with me, go from setup to tear down and work with me through the flow of the day, it's not hard to learn. It just is knowing where to pay attention and knowing how to understand what to do. And this last one in this little section, equipment logistics. I kind of hinted at it about getting things to the places. I drive incredible number of miles every year. I stay in hotels almost every weekend in getting the equipment out to the places it needs to be for the events to happen. If we can distribute equipment and have it in distributed places, that transit changes. If we can come up with other models, maybe working with the pods folks, there's a way. But I need some help in helping make that happen, right? I'm at the limits in terms of my mental energies and physical energies with where I am. And so we really need everyone to be engaged and get involved. We need more events, whether it's a league event host or a qualifying tournament event host, or people who are willing to help find regional championship sites, right? There's some legwork that's needed to go out and find places that we can get the teams in and be able to compete. Without an event site, there's no event. And so we need people to be willing to step up. For many years, we talked about if 1 out of every 8 teams stepped up, found a site that would support a 16-team tournament, every team in the whole program would be given the opportunity to play at least twice, right? So it's that simple. The simple truth is also that the only thing that scales with team growth is teams. And so the best resource we can hope to draw from is all of you. And so if you will all get involved and work with us, then we can continue to make it happen, right? Next time you're at a qualifying tournament, take a look around, recognize that that's being run by volunteers. And if you're not willing to be part of the volunteer effort to help support the event, then maybe you should think about funding, providing the other resources that can help manage the event, right? If you're not going to be a volunteer, maybe you can pay for us to bring somebody in to do it for fee, right? So your help is critical. And then I mentioned before the planning and execution committee that's getting created for our regional championship. We're really, again, trying to build a long-term sustainable model that will exist beyond my capacities, right? Because as we continue to grow, our event base will continue to grow, and it's going to need more and more. Hey, so team grants. I didn't know I was going to be able to put this slide into the deck until middle of today. I got a email confirmation from my first contact that helps manage the PG&E and Dreammaker funds. So like I said on that early sponsor slide, there's still some details for the PG&E side for our regional championship sponsorship. That's not 100% confirmed yet. The Dreammaker funds, actually, my understanding is the check's already been sent to first, and then I'll get a share sent to me that I can distribute to teams. That set of funds do apply as team grants. I don't have the details yet from PG&E and Dreammaker Fund what the criteria they wish us to apply to how we fund teams this year is. So the details are still coming. The application process and what that set of criteria aren't defined to my knowledge yet. As soon as I've got the information, we'll share it and publish out to everybody. We're going to try to pull the timeline in a little bit so that the checks can get distributed in a more timely way. Because once the season gets going, it's hard for me to dedicate a whole lot of time to generating checks. Because in addition to all the other things I do with Playing at Learning, I am the CIO / treasury guy / finance guy, whatever you want to call it. So I write all the checks. So it's still coming. We're excited that PG&E and the Dreammaker Fund appear to be coming back, and we're looking forward to passing on some of that excitement to the teams as we can with the requirements that PG&E and Dreammaker Fund are going to put on us. Okay, so expect to see these next two slides in almost every town hall and presentation we do this year. There's a couple of really key resources that teams just need to be aware of and need to get used to being go-to resources. The first is the game and season information page on the firstinspires.org website. Several of the pieces I'm mentioning here are referenced there, but there's a ton of really good information. It is your go-to source for the current game manual. It's your go-to source for links to other resources, team management resources, mentoring resources, technical resources. It's just a good landing spot for exploring where you need to get information from. Next up, last year they started a new site called FTC Docs as part of the First Inspires website that provides a easy to use technical resource set for all of the technology that goes into the First Tech Challenge program. It's operated and managed by the engineering staff in First Tech Challenge and the volunteers that write the software development kit and the scoring software and a few other pieces. So there's a lot of sharp people providing very good information there. That's a great place to go look for answers to questions when you've got them. Next up is the team Q&A. So it is a resource for teams to be able to ask questions and get some clarification on things about robots and things about gameplay, things about events, right? So it's a resource. Basically anything that's in the competition manual and you want to look at understanding the why of it, this is a great place to ask. For all you veteran teams out there, please recognize that the Q&A is not an authoritative source anymore. The Q&A is for explanation, not for definition. The competition manual is the definition and is if there's conflict between all things, the competition manual is the final say on how things are to be interpreted. So just be aware of that, be ready for that. And that is the new model. If you're a rookie team, just make sure you read the competition manual. The Q&A is currently slated to open the 16th. in our game design committee meeting today, we were talking through some of the details on it. There are a few technical details that are being worked out in moving from the game manual structure from past seasons to the competition manual structure for this season. So I don't know that they've got them all worked out yet. They are still anticipating opening up the Q&A on the 16th. The link to it there, again, you can find this link in the game and season information page. The code you'll need, lead coach 1 and lead coach 2 should have access to a code in the team dashboard that provides a way of creating an account within the Q&A system. There will be one account per team, and in the ideal case, it'll all flow through lead coach 1 or lead coach 2. My understanding is those codes have not yet been published, and they probably can't get published until shortly before the Q&A opens, just based on my understanding of how the overall system works. Until they work out all the kinks from the map over of structures from last year to this year, they likely can't go through the process of generating the codes. So if you don't see it yet in your dashboard, that's probably why. We have a bunch of resources that are specific to here just in NorCal. So if you haven't found it yet, please take a look at the NorCal FTC website. Admittedly, there are a few parts that are a little stale. There are a couple of key pieces to make sure you're paying attention to. First off is the team list. You're going to use the team list. I can say this without a doubt. You will use the team list. It basically is a large list of all the teams, big scrolling list of teams in numerical order. There is a little search box at the top corner of the list. If you really want to try to get to a team quickly, that's an easy way to find it. Probably the most single useful part of it is the team status page. In the rightmost column of that team list, there is a link that says status. It takes you to what is effectively a mini dashboard for your team. It is information we pull from the first database. It includes all of your registration information, whether or not you're paid for the season, what the status for the lead coach 1 and lead coach 2 are. It'll include information about the roster status, right? Is your roster consistent with itself? In some sense, it basically boils down to your mentors have said that there's this many members on your team, and not all your members have done their consent release forms. So when those two things match, the status page will say that your roster is complete. Your roster needs to be complete before you compete in events. So make sure you take care of that and get it going. And the last piece that's there towards the bottom of that status dashboard is the area where the qualifier preferencing and registration will take place. So be ready. Again, we'll run a town hall. We'll talk a little bit more. We've got some screenshots and things that help make it clear before we actually turn the system on so that you can understand and be prepared. We'd like everybody to be comfortable with the system so that it's easy for you to work with and you're not confused by it. Right? The intention is not to confuse. The intention is to provide a fair, equitable way for everybody to be able to access event registration. And wow, I've been talking too fast. We have about 20 minutes in what I had planned. I'm willing to go a little longer if we need to start going through questions. So this is the time. If you've got questions, you can type your questions in the question box and Ashley will run through them in sequence and we'll try to give you an answer as much as we can. We'd really like the questions not to be about the competition manual. We'd like this to be about the season or the program, sort of high-level questions. Really don't want to dive deep into the rules about the robot construction or the rules about the gameplay or the rules about the events. We can talk about high-level changes, sure, but really want to focus on the big picture so that we get that going. There'll be opportunities for asking questions about rules and things like that for the whole community as we go through the next couple of months. So with that, has anybody got a question?
Thanks, Mark, for a great presentation. So I see that Pranad has his hand raised. So I'm going to unmute you if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
And after we unmute you, you will need to unmute yourself. And if you're not able to unmute yourself, go ahead and type your question into the question feature, and we'll try to answer it that way.
I don't have any unanswered questions yet in the question box. So anybody feel free to ask a question and we'll do our best to answer it. You can type it or raise your hand. Okay, our first question is, new to FTC, could you please explain what a league means and to register for the league?
Okay, so a league is so there's two basic styles of first level gameplay, first level events for teams in the First Tech Challenge program. There are what are referred to as qualifying tournaments, and then there are leagues. A league is a closed group of teams that go through a sequence of events together. So they play in 3 or more what are called meets. They're sort of a half-day robot gameplay only. And then they finish their season with a league tournament, which is roughly equivalent to a qualifying tournament in terms of how the day works. It's a full day event, full judging, full robot gameplay playoffs. The meets themselves, teams come in, play 5 or 6 matches and go away. No judging, no playoffs. It's just matches. When they come to the league tournament, the best 10 matches for each of the teams from those meets is accumulated and pre-ranks the teams into that final league tournament. So it does accumulate and roll forward. So effectively, by the time the league tournament aspect is done, they've all played at least once. Qualifying tournaments, similar idea. Differences boil down to a team may play in no more than one league. And in our region, you either play in leagues or you play in qualifying tournaments, not both. So it's one or the other. So part of the reason why it looked like we closed things when we did wasn't so much that we're not saying new teams can't be part of the league. There was some need to get some communication started. There's a lot of groundwork. The leagues are a self-contained, self-supporting event. A lot of what we talked about with event logistics and event management and things like that is done by the teams within the league. And so, as an example, on kickoff day, each of the 4 leagues held as part of their day, held a discussion about exactly those kinds of things. Okay, who's going to step up to help with being the volunteers to help run this league for the season? Qualifying tournaments, teams by rule are allowed to play in up to 3 and advance. If they play in any beyond 3, they can't win awards or advance. The way we've implemented that traditionally in Northern California is that means you can't register for more than 3. We've never had the capacity to support that much gameplay for all the teams. And so we've rolled back. So that 2.5 number I talked about in one of the slides, that's been our historical goal. We've only gotten there a couple of times. We usually end up falling a little bit short because a lot of it relies on the volunteers that run the qualifying tournaments, right? So corporate sites, teams, schools, FRC teams, those are the organizations that have been helping us run the events. If there aren't enough of those, there aren't enough events and teams don't get to play as frequently. And then basically, sometime during the summer each year, we start to broadcast are you interested in participating in a league, kind of a survey-oriented form. So we collect teams that are interested, we try to identify what regions they belong to, and sort of parcel them out. And so, for example, we had a few teams this year that were in leagues last year who decided, no, we're going to move back to qualifiers. We had a few teams that said, well, we think we'd fit better in a league over here. And we had one team move from the Northeast sort of Sacramento area league to now be part of what's the East Bay League. So they're just moving. and we have a handful of new teams that say they want to be involved. The cutoff and deadline that happened is just about the logistics of getting the leagues coordinated and going. They are going to start playing in early November, right? There's not an option. They got to play in November, play in December, play in January, and then come back and play their league tournament either in late January or early February in order to dovetail into everything else that's going on in the region. So there's some time pressure in getting it going.
Awesome, great answer. So our next question is from Manuel, and I'm actually going to unmute you in a second. His question is there support for the Onshape software for teams?
Absolutely. There's a dedicated group of volunteers on the East Coast, I believe out of North Carolina, that every year put together a whole library of the parts, including they were sort of brought under the tent to be made aware. We made them sign an NDA, brought under the tent to be made aware of the game and the field. So all the models of the game and the field are available and should be already published. Again, that either the FTC docs or the game and season information page would have links to what is currently published. If it isn't published already, it will be very shortly. But Onshape is one of the packages that is supported via the efforts of those key volunteers.
Thank you.
And in fact, I believe that several of the images in the competition manual are actually of the Onshape model as opposed to the I don't remember. I don't know if they're in SolidWorks or Fusion, the other packages that are being used. But the Onshape models, a couple of them, I know the images in the manual are Onshape models.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, our next question says, how will the hotel registration to participate at the FTC Championship in Houston work?
And this is a great question that I don't have an answer for. This is not something that's been fully communicated out to the community. The information that's been shared so far is a heads up, this is coming. So I don't know if it means that when you go to register, there's going to be a block that says, okay, how many rooms you're going to buy. You got to buy a minimum of this many based on the number of team members you have. I don't have all those answers. I'm not 100% sure that First has all those answers yet. I believe they're working with a third party to help manage this, but there aren't a lot of details yet. Stay tuned. I would assume that those details are going to start flowing as we get closer to the sort of middle of the season. I surely would hope that they would come start to get published out certainly by the December, January timeframe. There are regional championships that take place by the end of December in some regions. There are places where the FTC and FRC programs are managed by the same organization, and they try to finish their whole season by the end of December so that they can focus solely on the first robotics competition program beginning in January when their kickoff takes place. So it is something new. I don't know exactly the rationale behind the decision. Don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. Pick which of the phrasings you want to use. I know there's been some heartburn amongst a lot of the long historied FRC teams that go to the championship frequently. We will see how this all plays out, whether or not there's any changes, but I would expect information to come soon.
Awesome. So while we're waiting for more questions, I just wanted to kind of circle back to something Mark said a while ago, is that we need at least 10 more qualifiers so that everybody can have more plays. So usually we have our veteran teams host some of our qualifiers, but I wanted to mention, if you are a rookie and you believe that your site has the space, we would love for you to connect with us. Feel free to give me a call and we can set up a walkthrough to see if you have a viable space, because we do have several veteran teams that would like to host. They just don't have the space. So Feel free to reach out to us.
And there's one thing I think I glossed over. Let me go flip back through my slides here real quick. And I got one thing that I sort of skipped talking about that's worth mentioning. So in this qualifier registration process, no, that's not the one. In this one, event registration and costs. I told you I mentally rearranged things. I skipped my first two bullets after mentally rearranging it. Go figure. Too much time at the wedding and all of the parties this last weekend. We are anticipating trying something new of offering an incentive to teams that register and play in November events will get effectively an improved priority for registering for later season events. So one of the things that happens is the way our systems work. When you go to register an event, your priority is determined by how many previous events you've registered for. So if you've registered for just no events, you sort of are in the group that has the highest priority. If you've registered for just one event, we're going to put you in the second priority. If you've registered for two events, you're in the third priority. So what we're talking about doing is taking and maybe splitting those groups a little bit so that if you register for a November event as your first registration, when it comes time for that second registration, I'm going to split the group, but I'm going to pull in anybody that registers for a second event in January. We don't know the details yet, but basically, I'm going to push them ahead of all those teams that didn't. So that we're going to give them a little bit of a boost to the front. I'm not going to guarantee you're going to get a space, but you're going to get some better priority. The one thing we did do the last couple of seasons, we did this wave-based registration is if your team is one of the host registrations, you will get promoted to the front of the line for the first event registration cycle. So we understand that it's a hardship to run an event, and we don't allow you to compete in the events that you host. And in exchange, we give you an extra priority in order to be able to get you registered into an event, sort of in a not exactly guaranteed, but a more guaranteed way. So that's one thing I kind of skipped over when I mentally rearranged this slide. So two important incentives. We do really depend a lot on our host teams. And when we look at the event calendar, there currently are a lot of weekends in November that don't have events on them. And we have, I think, 2 or 3 currently scheduled into November. If those weekends in November don't get filled and those events in November get canceled, it puts even more pressure on the December, January, February events for registering, right? And so just beware, people don't play in those events. It's just going to be even harder to get to play in the later events. Any other questions?
Not yet. So anybody, oh, one just came in. Okay. Does host team have to find referees themselves?
So yes and no. We do try to provide some help, but the simple truth is as the program grows, the volunteer base needs to grow too. And so we need to rely on recruiting of new volunteers, right? It is just a truth of the way the system works. I have currently 4 or 5 individuals that have served as my head referees over many years. Well, that means that there's just that many events. Between the leagues and the qualifying tournaments, they're busy. And so can't rely on them to do all the events. Isn't really very fair. Similar for the referees. We like to have the qualifying tournament hosts help with the process. We really need you to be boots on the ground and bringing new resources in. We do try to help with assigning people and encouraging people to volunteer at your events, but I can't fill the volunteer base for your event. Is kind of the fundamental, right? If you just think about the magnitude of the problem, at 16 qualifying tournaments, 4 league tournaments, and a dozen meets, that's like 32 events that need to have volunteer staff to them. While Ashley is hardworking, and I try to be hardworking, there's absolutely no physical way that we could have the bandwidth to populate 32 events worth of volunteers. So we really do need all of the events to be the sort of the primary, and that the sort of centralized resources are there as backfill and secondary. And again, I write the referee training materials. It's not hard. It's intimidating. People are nervous about it until they've actually done it. And then most people who do the referee role end up sticking with it, right? The two head referees that I mentioned, Rick and Jeff, Jeff's been doing head refereeing for, I don't know, something on the order of 15, 16 years now, pretty much since First Tech Challenge has been around. Rick was a head referee for the first LEGO League program for a few years before jumping over to First Tech Challenge. Jeff now travels to Houston with me as one of my sort of second tier chief referees for the program. So he helps me oversee all the fields, all the divisions at the event. So we do have a good base, and people do tend to stick with it, but we do need consistently and constantly more volunteers.
Great answer. So we do have another minute or two. If anybody has any last minute questions, feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat.
I just was peeking and I saw that can the team list be updated frequently? I have asked for several years for an automated methodology to be able to do it. First, IT has a sort of limited staff and a limited budget. I've told them what they need to fix to allow me to do it. The data source we have is basically Tableau. That's the engine they've got to give us the reports that we can use. And the way they've implemented it, there is no way to automate it. So if I could, I would. I've written all the tools to be able to do it. I've shown them how they need to rearrange their data. But until they make the decision to do it, it just isn't going to happen. Typically, this time of year, I'm updating once or twice a week. As we get closer to event registration, where your status has bigger impact, we typically update more than once a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And so, we do try to keep up. You should also be aware that if you make changes to your team's information in the first database, including things like paying or coach screening and things like that, those are not live reflected. So the payment doesn't happen at first. It actually happens at a vendor called Pitsco. And so it takes a couple, something on the order of 24 hours for payment information to reflect into the first databases. Somebody has to push a button to cause it to happen. Similarly, for the screening statuses, the final step in all the screening statuses is a human review. And so, getting a screening result on a Friday afternoon and hoping that's going to apply to a Saturday event may or may not happen, depending upon what time in the afternoon. First headquarters are in the Eastern time. So it would just depend on whether or not it was before that group of people, that group of staffers finished their workday. So be early, don't be late is kind of the advice there. Be aware there are lags in how their databases update, and just make sure you're taking advantage of that awareness.
Okay, our next question says, what could parents do to volunteer? Could we mandate volunteering for parents?
We love when parents volunteer. There are a few roles that we don't allow them to volunteer for, just because of the potential for a perception of conflict of interest. So we don't allow parents or other affiliated adults to volunteer as judges or judge advisors. We don't allow them to volunteer as a head referee, but they could be a regular referee. So there's a handful of roles that have that kind of non-affiliation character to them. Mandating is a difficult problem. So if I mandate parents to volunteer and they don't show up, what do I do? And so there's this challenge of how do I enforce that mandate? We've looked at it in the past and none of the answers are very satisfactory. I can't put them in responsible roles because if they don't show up, I'm in a hole, and I may not have somebody to fill that responsible role. So for example, a scorekeeper, right? Scorekeeper needs to understand a little bit about how the scorekeeping software works, and then there's a little bit of knowledge that needs to come in ahead of time. And if I put a parent in that role and they just don't show up, what's the event do? What consequences would there be for the team then? Is that fair to punish a whole team's worth of children for one parent's failure? Right. So I don't have an answer to that question. Our First Leg League program has First Leg League Challenge program has a parent volunteering mandate. It suffers a lot of those same problems with no show, or the volunteers will show up to check a box on that they showed up, and then they don't actually do their job. So, mandates without enforcement don't work, but the enforcement models create an awkward negative for the kids that we're really trying to serve. So, don't know. If anything, I'd probably look more at a paid model. I'm going to charge your team an extra $100, and I'm going to go out and hire a handful of college students to come in and be those volunteers. That presents its own set of problems on playing at learning, since suddenly I now have a bunch of additional employees, and so it's a challenging problem.
Okay, Manuel, I just unmuted you. You said, can we ask a league specific question? Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm not quite sure how to ask this question. It's just more of a better understanding of the allegiance teams that combine at a tournament, right?
Yep.
How do we better monitor, or maybe I'm understanding the process wrong, where you have allegiance teams that are ranked that are ranked pretty high, and getting together with another team that's ranked pretty low, and they're skipping teams that are closer ranking to they should be playing at the end rather than being skipped. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and it happens at more events than you'd imagine, and it isn't actually a league specific question. It's really boils down to, why do teams make the decisions they do? So a lot of our very experienced teams do a lot of what's called scouting. So they spend a lot of time looking at how a team's capabilities dovetail well with theirs. And so sometimes the rankings at the end of an event, so leagues don't tend to suffer this as much as, for example, qualifying tournaments do, but you have a random number of matches, or not a random number, you have a finite number of matches you've played with random partners and random opponents. So the people at First Headquarters ran through an experience to try to figure out what the ideal minimum number of matches would be to have the rankings be more predictive, more reflective of the actual strength of the teams. And they ended up figuring out that it's somewhere around 10 to 12 matches per team, which is unfortunately unattainable in a single day event, right? The FTC championship runs 10 matches a team at last year's first championship. It took 2.5 days of qualifying match play to make that happen. Mm-hmm. And this is with a very experienced event volunteer group, right? So the volunteers that are at the first championship are the people that are running the events at all the big regions, right? I take a bunch of volunteers from NorCal. There's a bunch of volunteers from Texas, from Washington. All the big regions have a bunch of volunteers. So the actual rankings you have, particularly at the 5-6 match number, may not actually be very reflective of the team's strengths and qualities. So that scouting process is one way to try to look past that. The leagues, in theory, are going to have a little bit better of an advantage because of the nature of it's 15 to 18 matches that you're accumulating into that final ranking instead of 5 or 6, right? Because it's the best 10 plus whatever happens at that league tournament. You still have the issue that if teams had a really bad meet, or miss to meet, they don't have as much opportunity to be able to throw away some of those ranking points that they lost as teams that played in every match. So it is a problem. One of the changes you will see this year is a change in the way the playoff structure works. It's no longer going to be a best of 3. It is now going to be a double elimination with a winning bracket and a losing bracket. You won't play the same alliance more than once unless it is in the very later parts of the bracket. Right? You're going to end up playing a broader range. It'll be very interesting this year to see what impact that has on how alliance selection works, because it's a little bit different. If you actually look at as well at the advancement order, there was a change made in how the advancement works. Used to be it was first place Inspire, captain of the winning alliance, second place Inspire, first pick on the winning alliance. Well, they've reversed that third and fourth position. So it's first place Inspire, captain of the winning alliance, first pick on the winning alliance. The theory from the FTC staff is that provides a better probability of both of those two teams advancing instead of just one of those two teams. The other change that's happening, I've lost my train of thought, derailed myself. Too many changes.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been going through is trying to help everybody understand how to digest all the changes. And the language we're actually starting to use is don't digest the changes. Just think of it as a whole new thing and learn it all from scratch. Whereas trying to keep track of where things changed and didn't is just going to be a mess.
Yes. Okay. I may send Ashley a separate email then to better clarify the situations that we witnessed last year.
Oh, there's definitely cases where sibling teams pick one another in odd ways. They pull their weaker partners through.
Yes.
Again, that's the. I didn't go deeper into those other reasons why teams pick, but that is one of the reasons, right? I know the advancement from this league is only going to be 2 teams. And so it doesn't really matter who I pick. Maybe I can give my weaker sibling team a chance to be in the playoffs at the league tournament. So there's all kinds of different mentalities that go into why picks get made.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're a beginning team that's looking to move into and compete at a higher level, your robot not only has to be great, you also have to play other factors into how do you move on in your rankings, right? From scouting.
It's good to remember that scouting is important, even just from the perspective of, even if I'm not a strong team, how I can talk and present the strengths of my team. Right, you're going to have conversations with the other teams. You're going to be given opportunities to explain what your strategies are, how your gameplay works, what the kinds of capabilities of your robot are. But the other important thing to remember is when you look at the advancement order, half the advancement is judged and half the advancement is robot gameplay. So, if you really want to be a team that advances and plays at the highest level, you really need to pay attention to more than just one aspect of the program. If you're building a great robot, your only path is that winning alliance. If you're spending the time to develop a strong team, there are several opportunities in that top end to be able to come in, right? The Inspire and Think Awards are strong candidates in that top level.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any more questions? I don't see any hand raised. And no more questions in the chat.
And I know there've been a bunch of questions about leagues. We likely will do oh my God, what's a league kind of a town hall as we get later in the season. Right? We are sort of at a point that that information really doesn't mean anything to anybody this year, but it could mean something to somebody trying to figure out what they want to do next year. And so end of the season, maybe even after our regional championship, but to provide an opportunity for teams that are wanting to explore what the alternatives are to qualifying tournament play, opportunities to look, see, and think about it. understand it. I guess the other change that's part of the playoff structures is there will be no 3-team alliances in anything other than, if I read the manual correctly, anything other than the first championship in April. All the other alliances will be 2 teams. And the number of alliances that are playing in the playoffs will change based on the size of the event. Should end up working out about the same participation level, but it's a different structure. So there won't be 2 picks. There'll only be the 1 pick.
Okay, well, it looks like the questions are winding down. Any final questions or hand raises? Just go ahead and raise your hand or drop it in the chat.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Someone said, can you repeat again regarding alliance?
So I'm assuming this is the question about 2-team versus 3-team alliances. I'll answer that way. If it's not, ask again with a little bit more clarity. In years past, at larger events, I think the number was 21. When you got to 21 teams at an event, that changed the alliance from being 2 teams on alliance to being 3 teams on alliance. Under the way the game manuals, competition manuals currently structured, all alliances in the playoffs at regional championship and below levels will be 2 teams. But based on the number of teams at the event, there'll be a change in the number of alliances that are in the playoff brackets, right? So at a small event, it may only be 2, right? The two alliances, right? At a really small event, 8 teams, 2 alliances. As you get up to like 16 teams, now it's 4 alliances, equivalent basically to what it was in prior years. As you start to get to like 24 teams, maybe it's now 6 alliances of 2 teams each. And so the math ends up working out that it's about the same number of teams participating in the alliance, but the one truth is that all the teams play in all the matches that alliance plays. In the old model with 3-team alliances, 1 team is sitting out while 2 are playing. And then in the next match that alliance plays, that team that sat out had to play, and one of the other 2 had to sit out. So different model, different way of getting more teams into the playoffs. The double elimination model allows for more flexibility in defining that kind of a structure and have it still fit into a reasonable event day. So it's something new. There's a whole section on it in the competition manual. If you haven't gotten that part, you may want to spend a little bit of time reading it because it is unusual compared to what we've had in years past and is maybe a little difficult to understand if you don't have a strong sports background. Right, the double elimination structure is something that is common in a lot of sports as a way of providing good opportunities for gameplay.
Awesome, that was a great answer. Thank you so much. I'm sure many other people were wondering about that as well. I guess this is our final announcement for questions or raised hand. No raised hands, no questions. I guess we'll go ahead and let everybody go.
Excellent. Thank you all for spending a little bit more than an hour with us this evening. I hope we answered some of your concerns and questions about the season. Feel free to reach out to us. My information is all over the place. Email generally works best for me. I wasn't smart like Ashley and put a slide in. I should have. She told me she was doing it and I just didn't. Been a crazy day. And email works best for me just because of the pace I generally move at. But reach out to us if there's something you don't understand. Email to ftc@playingatlearning.org actually goes to both of us. As Ashley mentioned, email is not her preferred and not her quickest response method. Email in general is my quickest response method. So feel free to use that when reaching out to me, either directly marke@playingatlearning.org or to ftc@playingatlearning.org, which gets to me eventually as well. With that, thanks everyone. And as Dory would say, just keep swimming. And then just a little tasty tidbit. The whale shark's part of the picture because one of my adventures this summer was swimming with whale sharks. So it's a story for another time, but it was a lot of fun and quite an experience. So just keep swimming. Good night, everyone.
Good night.